So my name is Ellen Taylor, for those of you who don't know me. I chair the festival, and I'm also coordinator of the Humanities and teach in the English program. And I want to start by thanking our festival sponsors. This festival is made possible with funding by the Provost's Office, the Cultural Events Committee, College of Arts and Sciences, and the Diversity Committee. And I also want to thank my colleagues and friends, Elizabeth Powers, who you're going to see up here in a few minutes, introducing our student poets, Robert Kellerman, who chaired our panel discussion on poetry and truth, and David Greenham, who designed our programs, name tags, and a number of other details that make it all possible. So for 16 years now, Duff Plunkett reminded us it's our Sweet 16. 16 years now, we've been hosting this festival to make poetry available and accessible to all, students, faculty, staff, and the community. So all are welcome here, regardless of race, class, gender identification, immigration status. Everybody's welcome. So, for those of you new to the festival, the event is held in April, National Poetry Month, and in honor of Terry Plunkett, an English professor here at UMA for nearly 30 years. Terry was co-editor of The Kennebec, a portfolio of Maine writing, which was an annual magazine that's now digitally archived and searchable. Many Maine writers had their first work in print from The Kennebec, thanks to Terry's encouragement. So in his spirit, we have this festival to honor emerging writers and those well-established. And those of you who took part in our afternoon heard many of those voices, and you'll hear some more tonight. I did look up the Kennebec in the digital archive this week, and it's really humorous. I encourage you to look at some of the first issues that were published there. A lot of political satire.
Good evening. First, I'd like you to join me in thanking UMA Professor of English, Dr. Ellen Taylor, for her leadership in putting on this festival. I'm very pleased to welcome all of you to the University of Maine at Augusta and the Plunkett Maine Poetry Festival. The festival, as Ellen indicated, now in its 16th year, celebrates the best in Maine poetry as well as the heart of a community. Like the festival, UMA is open to all and celebrates inclusion. And like the festival, UMA's academic theme for this academic year is truth. And we have been celebrating this theme throughout the year in our classrooms and beyond. Joseph Jackson, one of the poets on the panel discussion this afternoon and a graduate of UMA, stated, "Education is personal growth through knowledge." I thought that was quite poetic. And that is the essence of what we do here at UMA, to offer this transformational experience of growth through knowledge to all who come here, whether it's to pursue a degree or just for a day like this one. Today's afternoon panel discussion was the only part of the festival I was able to attend other than being here now, but I'm so glad I did, for it was there that I learned of the beauty of the Sudan, that it was partly spoken in a language I did not understand made no difference. I saw the truth of it in my mind's eye. I heard the truth in the voice of the people of the First Nation that was kept from me in the history books that we studied as children. I discovered that poets are dangerous. It's true, they told me. And also that they protect our truths as the guardians of language. And it was exposed that when voices are left out, truth cannot be found. We're so pleased to have Sharon Olds here with us tonight, as well as our student poet presenters. Please enjoy the evening.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Powers, and it was my pleasure to chair the judging committee for the student poetry contests. I'm very excited that Sharon Olds will be reading for us later this evening, and I feel like I'm just as excited for the student poets that I'll read before her. No offense, Sharon, they're pretty awesome. The Plunkett Poetry Contest judging panel included a UMA student, Alex Miller, a UMA faculty member, Rob Kellerman, and myself, and Maine poet and jet setter, Duff Plunkett. We received over 90 entries from across the state, and it was truly a delight to read the work of so many emerging poets. If you're ever having a down day and you can read a bunch of new poets, it's just a better day. So I'll start with our University of Maine system category, which invites submissions from all students enrolled at any UMaine school. This year, our third place winner is Gail Bello for her poem, When I Saw Degas' Little Dancer of 14 Years. Gail is a creative writing major and theater minor at UMaine Farmington. She is co-editor of the online literary magazine The River, and her work has been published in the Sandy River Review, Ripple, and Water Soup. Please join me in welcoming Gail to read.
Hello, thank you everyone for coming out for this event. This is really amazing. So this poem is about the sculpture by Edgar Degas, and as Elizabeth said, is titled When I Saw Degas' Little Dancer of 14 Years. From the gallery I viewed her. She stood in fourth position, fingers laced behind her back, nose pointed up and chin held high, a satin bow tied around her solid ponytail. 6 buttons clamp her corset tight, above the tutu of gauze hanging from her bronze hips. Her gaze fell just over my head from her pedestal inside her glass case. The prodigy ballerina I failed to be, never taking in directions, I simply pranced about the room and only walked on my tiptoes for my own amusement. I hung up my leotard and slippers at the tender age of 3 after the career-ending injury of a pinched finger in a boarded-up window pane. But when I look back at Polaroids of that little girl in pink, hair in a bun and hand on the bar, I'm proud of her for being a nonconformist so young, striving for fun instead of flawlessness upon that polished wood floor with no discipline to immortalize in a statuette like her. Thank you.
Our second place awardee is Billy Rose Newby. Billy Rose is a first-year creative writing and theater major at UMaine Farmington. She is the recipient of the Excellence in Writing Playwriting Award at the Jeff Walker Youth One Act Festival and first prize in the Delaware Young Playwrights Festival. Please join me in welcoming Billy Rose.
Contents of Uncle John's Attic. A tulip, now dry but once purple. The one he sold her when they first met. A necklace, a bird charm missing its rhinestone eye. The one she wore when he came to the door. A knitted blanket, slightly tattered but loved. The one they lay on under the stars when they first kissed. A ring, foggy brass and a dull diamond, the one he presented to her on one knee. A dress, once white, now tinted, yellow and slightly stained, the one she let dampen as she walked down the aisle in the rain. A photo, unclear to see but easy to understand, the one she took of the inside of her belly. A crib, repackaged without skill, the one he tried to build without instructions. A hat, small and pink, the one his mother bought because she was so sure it was a girl. A coat, little and blue, the one her father bought because he was so sure it was a boy. A onesie, tiny and green, the one they bought because they were just happy it was coming. A chest, dusted and carefully packaged. The one they put all the clothes in when the baby never breathed. A book, not very broken in, but dusty, the one he read instead of thinking about it. A scarf, shrunk by water, but never washed, the one she wore when she went on a walk to the bridge. A CD, the case cracked and disc missing, the one he was listening to when the police knocked on the door. A tulip, now dry and missing petals, the one he placed on her grave. Thank you.
Sam Johnson is our first place honoree in the Humane System category for his poem, One of My Stories. Sam is a third-year psychology major, English minor at UMaine Orono. He lives in Old Town with his fiancée, Allison, who's here tonight too, and his dog, Maggie, who I don't think I've seen, and enjoys spending time with both Allison and Maggie outside. So welcome, Sam.
Hi. Yeah, Maggie had another obligation tonight. So this poem actually has a footnote, and since I didn't print copies for everyone, I'm just going to read you the footnote ahead of time. There's a word in there, dishka. It's a Soviet-made heavy machine gun, primarily used against armored vehicles and aircraft. And so that's, I guess, my hook for the poem, so you'll listen. It's just about another crazy day in Afghanistan. It's called One of My Stories. A Bible, still sealed in plastic, sat tucked in the side pocket of my olive drab duffel, representing desperate fear, both at the bottom of the netted pile on such a large olive drab and empty plain. My mother handed me a tiny speckled stone, the smoothest on our beach. A worry stone, she called it. I tucked it in the palm of my support hand glove on patrols. The cold polish reminded me of her smile, widening through her worst tears. Gray spots were boats resting in Somes Harbor. White flecks, a sea salt spray in the breeze. I would need it and feel a flushed static only felt by kids in the desert. When the dishka looked me in my dilated blues, I lost something inside. Digital camouflage clung to shaking legs. Leather glove, tight with sweat, snapped to carbine, and I felt the smoothest stone strike the hand grip hard, with desperate fear, reminding me of what I used to have. The soon-to-be dead man reminded me of my mother in that moment, and I felt the strangest urge to hug him close and cry. My vulnerabilities crept tiger-like, but I laughed at the forgotten Bible, packed and not needed. It was the pebble that saved the would-be dead man's life. Thank you.
We're going to move back in time now from college to high school, which is always fun, right? So all high school students in Maine are invited to submit work, and we received so many amazing submissions. 3 that especially stood out. Our third place winner is Natalie Rogers, a sophomore at Winthrop High School. She especially enjoys Latin and creative writing classes, and she's here to share with us her winning poem, Cold, which I blame for the snow today. Welcome, Natalie.
This is called Cold. I missed the warmth of the shower the moment after my hand turned the knob. Covered in hot water, I was hidden, numbed, and concealed. But without it, I was naked, stripped of the heat that once made me feel whole. And I was so quick to leave it, the loving water in that moment just the same as my dad, gone, forgotten, but forever longed for after. I wished I had basked in the feeling while I still had it. Without the protection of showers and of a father's affection, I am shattered, my mask broken like cracked porcelain, hard and heartless with an interior of rock where everyone else is made of embers. I yearn to forever hold that heat with me like it is a part of me whenever I want it to always feel warm and nice and fuzzy inside, but instead I always feel cold. Thank you.
Miles Lloyd is a 10th grader at Maine Coast Waldorf High School. He loves playing music and busking on the streets and acting with local theater groups. Tonight, he'll share with us his winning poem, The Fisherman. Welcome, Miles.
Thank you. All right, so I wrote this poem for a class assignment, and the prompt was to write a poem off of an image or a painting. So yeah, it's called The Fisherman. The cormorant and his master settle on the shore of the river Lee. The water is calm, clear and dark as misty sorrows that have been ground up into gray pebbles, stars that lost their light and fell to earth. Behind them, the limestone pinnacles of Gangji province reach into the pale blue air. They scrape the sky like fingernails. The bamboo raft has been pulled out of the water, and a man sits on it, cross-legged, smoking a pipe. Bits of wisdom are stuck in his teeth. He is wearing a wide-brimmed woven hat and large brown shoulder pads, like wings, to keep off the sun. It is evening, and the air is thick with fog. The cormorant is perched near a lantern. His feathers are creamy brown. The light makes them shimmer. He is the fisherman that floats on air, gliding like a boat on silk. His claws snatch a fish from the arms of the river, but he does not eat it. His throat is girded with a metal ring. He cannot swallow his prize. He returns the fish to the raft, to his master who is smoking a pipe. The day has worn down to darkness. The only light comes from a lantern. The fisherman and his master are searching the warmth for peace on the bank of the river Lee. The water is quiet and calm. Thank you.
The first place winner for our high school contest is Wilson Hames, who lives in Portland and attends the Maine Coast Waldorf School. In 2014, Wilson participated in the Telling Room's Young Emerging Authors program, and over the course of the year wrote and published her novella, Where the Ocean Meets the Sky. This spring, she'll attend the New England Young Writers Conference in Vermont. For tonight, she'll share her winning poem. Welcome, Wilson.
At the roots of the orange tree. When my skin melts away, my bones will become the roots of a tree. I'll rise through the trunk, splitting the grain, lightning within every limb. And at the end of each twig, I'll bloom through the bark, slowly unfurl my delicate arms, and grin at the flirtatious sun. The days will become moments, strung together like beads, each moment a pearl. And the sun will pull me away from the branches. My ivory arms will fall away, and I will ripen, the sun's golden jewel. In the moonlight, I'll cling close to my branch and gaze at the ghostly face in the dark, reflecting off the tides. And I'll stare in wonder at her milky complexion, powdered with the dust from seashells and bones. I'll hear her whisper stories to her children scattered about her, and they will all listen, tucked into the folds of darkness, sleep settling upon their eyes. I'll listen and let myself fall a little closer to earth. And as the days pass, I'll grow older, lean closer to the grass, smell the dirt, see the ants parade along the rough bark. And I'll remember running upon this earth, climbing this tree, eating an orange from the highest bough, the tangy flesh all blended with sea spray, and watching the gulls dive off the cliffs into the ocean. I'll remember the way my legs dangled as I sat high above the ground, and how my arms clung to the trunk. And then I'll fall in the darkest hours. The moon will gasp, her children will stop their chatter, and I'll rest at the roots of the orange tree, returning to my bones. Thank you.
So now I'm delighted to introduce our keynote poet, Sharon Olds. Many of us grew up reading her work, and she's included in our students' anthologies, and she's with us here tonight. So exciting. Snow is kind of added this magical quality to having her come. The Poetry Foundation describes Sharon Olds as one of our contemporary poetry's leading voices, winner of so many awards, including the Pulitzer Award, National Book Critics Award. Olds is known for writing emotional poetry which focuses on family life as well as global political events. We invited Sharon as our keynote poet this year, in part as to be included in our academic theme of truth, because Sharon is a poet who always tells the truth. In 2005, First Lady Laura Bush invited Olds to the National Book Festival in Washington, D.C. Olds responded, declining the invitation in an open letter published in the October issue of The Nation. The letter closes, and I'll quote the closing. So many Americans who felt pride in our country now feel anguish and shame for the current regime of blood, wounds, and fire. I thought of the clean linens at your table, the shining knives and flames of the candles, and I could not stomach it. End of quote. That's a poet who tells the truth. Charles Bainbridge writes in The Guardian, she has always confronted the personal details of her life with remarkable directness and honesty. But the key to her success is the way this material is lit up by the range of vividly judged scales, shifts in scale and perspective. Her poems are vivid morality plays, wrestling with ideas of right and wrong, full of symbolic echoes and possibilities. So please join me in a warm welcome for our keynote poet, Sharon Olds.
Thank you. Oh, I feel so at home because I've been hearing poems, and poems that are alive and vivid and strongly felt and artful in their craft. So there's that quality like listening to music at the same time as hearing images and a story. So thanks to the poets who have read so far. I feel a little abashed following their not only skill, but kind of decency also. Some of my truths have been regretted on the part of others that they have been told. So we're all here in the poetry family today, so we know that if we set out to write anything, that for the sake of shocking anyone, it's not going to work as a work of art. It's not going to be pleasing. It's not going to have integrity. That motivation is too much for a poem to bear. So we have to give them their freedom, and if they end up running with that freedom, then there we are in our fate. As it not? Well, I'd like to begin with a poem of Lucille Clifton. This is her poem. Okay. I'm going to try it about here. No one else popped a single P, the whole professional part of the reading, but here we go. This is her poem, Won't You Celebrate With Me? Won't you celebrate with me what I have shaped into a kind of life? I had no model, born in Babylon, both non-white and woman. What did I see to be except myself? I made it up here on this bridge between starshine and clay, my one hand holding tight my other hand. Come celebrate with me that every day something has tried to kill me and has failed. Lucille. So I am going to read some poems, and then we're going to have a conversation if you would like to have one. I am interested in hearing whatever you want to say or ask, kind of as the middle part of my part of this. I always have to say, this is water, and my tremor is harmless. So it's not like vodka or a bad tremor. It's just life. So I'll start with this poem of mine called Diagnosis. By the time I was 6 months old, she knew something was wrong with me. I got looks on my face she had not seen on any child in the family or the extended family or the neighborhood. My mother took me in to the pediatrician with the kind hands, the doctor with a name like a suit size for a wheel, Hub Long. My mom did not tell him what she thought in truth, that I was possessed. It was just these strange looks on my face. He held me and conversed with me, chatting as one does with a baby. And my mother said, "She's doing it now. Look, she's doing it now." And the doctor said, "What your daughter has is called a sense of humor." "Oh," she said, and took me back to the house where that sense would be tested and found to be incurable. So I notice that I like to tell stories, as well as making shapely, smallish, or sometimes more stretched out little works of art. I used to make paper doll houses when I was a kid, with paper furniture and paper people, and making things just struck me as the most wonderful possibility for me. And next, I'm going to read a very recent poem. I put them all in pairs tonight. So Lucille's poem and mine, Diagnosis, are kind of somehow a pair, and then the next two also. This is called No Makeup. Maybe one reason I do not wear makeup is to scare people. If they're close enough, they can see something is different with me, something unnerving, as if I have no features. I am embryonic, pre-eyebrows, pre-eyelids, pre-mouth. I am like a water bear talking to them, or an amniotic traveler, a vitreous floater on their own eyeball, human ectoplasm risen on its hind legs to discourse with them. And such a white girl, such a sickly toadstool, so pale, a visage of fog, a fizz of mist above a graveyard, no magenta roses, no floral tribute, no goddess, no grown-up woman, no acknowledgement of the drama of secondary sexual characteristics, just the gray matter of spirit talking, the thin features of a gray girl in a gray graveyard, granite, ash, chalk, dust. I tried the paint, but I could feel it on my skin. I could hardly move under the mask of my desire to be seen as attractive in the female way of 1957, and I could not speak. And when the makeup came off, I felt actual as a small mammal in the woods with a speaking countenance, or a basic primate having all the expressions which involved in us to communicate. If my teenage acne had left scars, if my skin were rough instead of soft, I probably couldn't afford to hate makeup or to fear so much the beauty salon or the very idea of beautyship. And my mother was beautiful, did I say this? In my small eyes and my smooth, withered skin, you can see my heart. You can read my naked lips. And I think that poem became okay, not just yeah, 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 when it turned to the mother. So that when I started writing it, I wasn't thinking of that. And then a little truth came in, and I thought, which is not fun for a person always, but for an artist, you know, it's such a treat when that happens. And these two poems that I'm reading, that one and this next one, are paired in a certain way. This one is called For You. In the morning, when I'm pouring the hot milk into the coffee, I put the side of my face near the convex pitcher to watch the last round drop from the spout. And it feels like being cheek to cheek with a baby. Sometimes the orb pops back up, a ball of cream balanced on a whale's watery exhale. Then I gather my tools, the cherry sounding board tray which will rest on my lap, the phone, the bird book to look up the purple martin. I repeat them as I seek them so as not to forget. Tray, cell phone, purple martin, tray, phone, Martin, Trayvon Martin. Song was invented for you. All art was made for you. Painting, writing was yours, our youngest, our most precious, to remind us to shield you. All was yours. All that is left on earth with your body was for you. And those two poems are paired in this reading because they were just accepted by a magazine. And that, thank you, thank you. So that's a great day for us. What am I doing? Okay. Yeah. Oh, yes. I have a chart. Where did it go? That's always what happens. We're just up here with ourselves. I'll read this one called First Thanksgiving. When she comes back from college, I will see the skin of her upper arms cool, matte, glossy. She will hug me, my old soupy chest against her breasts. I will smell her hair. She will sleep in this apartment, her sleep like an untamed, good object, like a soul in a body. She came into my life, the second great arrival, fresh from the other world, which lay from within him, within me. Those nights I fed her to sleep, week after week, the moon rising and setting and waxing, whirling over the months in a steady blur around our planet. Now she doesn't need love like that. She has had it. She will walk in glowing. We will talk. And then when she's fast asleep, I'll exult to have her in that room again, behind that door. As a child, I caught bees by the wings and held them some seconds, looked into their wild faces, listened to them sing, then tossed them back into the air. I remember the moment the arc of my toss swerved and they entered the corrected curve of their departure. When I first started sending poems out, one of the things that I wanted to write the most was love poems for family and then anger poems for family, kind of love for children, anger at parents. And there weren't a lot of poems like that. And many editors let me know that these were not appropriate subjects for poetry. In those days, editors knew what was appropriate for poetry. No one knows anything anymore, except the young know what they are going to bring, which will be new and will change poetry and make it what it's going to be. We don't know yet what that is, though tonight we hear some powerful truth and beauty that help us know. I agree so much with Ellen that we can have hope for who will hopefully be leading the world, the poetry world, if not the whatever it's called, the other one. And I would be informed by the editors. I actually received hate mail that I won't quote because who wants to think about that? But some vicious mail, and then things like, if you wish to write about your children, may we suggest the Ladies' Home Journal? We are a literary magazine. And luckily, I was rebellious by nature and experience. So it didn't stop me writing. It kind of almost redoubled my efforts. Okay. Yes, I'd like to read a couple of poems from this book, Stag's Leap, which is, I've started calling it my divorce book. I called it for a long time an end of long marriage book. So now I can call it by its name. And I'd like to read 2 poems from this and a couple of poems from the more recent book, and then we'll have our conversation if you would care to have one. I'm happy to have one. Poem for the breasts. Oh, it's like a story of poems written at the end by divorce, by a husband leaving of a long marriage. Poem for the breasts. Like other identical twins, they can be better told apart in adulthood. One is fast to wrinkle her brow, her brain, her quick intelligence. The other dreams inside a constellation, freckles of Orion. They were born when I was 13. They rose up half out of my chest. Now they're 40, wise, generous. I am inside them, in a way under them, or I carry them. I'd been alive so many years without them. I can't say I am them, though their feelings are almost my feelings, as with someone one loves. They seem to me like a gift that I have to give. That boys were said to worship their category of being, almost starve for it, did not escape me, and some young men loved them the way one would want oneself to be loved. All year they have been calling to my departed husband, singing to him like a pair of soaking sirens on a scaled rock. They can't believe he's left them. It's not in their vocabulary. They being made of promise, they're like literally kept vows. Sometimes now I hold them a moment, one in each hand, twin widows, heavy with grief. They were a gift to me, and then they were ours like thirsty nurslings of excitement and plenty. And now it's the same season again, the very week he moved out. Didn't he whisper to them, "Wait here for me 1 year"? No. He said, "God be with you, God by with you, God by for the rest of this life and for the long nothing." And they do not know language. They are waiting for him. My Christ, they are dumb. They do not even know they are mortal. Sweet, I guess, refreshing to live with. Beings without the knowledge of death, creatures of ignorant suffering. Thank you. I also tried to figure out how to have these poems not fill a whole book. It's funny, we have these ideas about what a book should have in it or shouldn't, and I would have ideas that I shouldn't show my obsession to tell a whole long story. I had a book, there is a book out there that I wrote called The Father, and similarly, I wanted to just have it be a part of a book, but it didn't want to do that. It wanted its own book, which was the right thing, I came to feel. To our miscarried one, age 30 now. Though I never saw you, only your clouds, I was afraid of you, of how you differed from what we had wanted you to be. And it's as if you waited then, where such waiting is done, for when I would look beside me, and here you are in the world of forms where my wifehood is now, and every action with him, as if 1,000 years from now, you and I are in some antechamber where the difference between us is of little matter. You with perhaps not much of a head yet, dear garden one. You among the shovels and spades and wafts of beekeeper's shroud and sky blue kidskin gloves. that he left me is not much compared to your leaving the earth, your shifting places on it and shifting shapes. You threw off your working clothes of arms and legs and moved house from uterus to toilet bowl and jointed stem and sewer out to float the rivers and bays in painless pieces. And yet, the idea of you has come back to where I could see you today as a small, impromptu God of the partial. When I leave for good, would you hold me in your blue mitt for the departure hence? I never thought to see you again. I never thought to seek you. I think I'll just read one more, and this is the poem that is not typed yet, still in its notebook. And I brought some notebooks with me to you to see if I could find one that I would read. It's really exciting to read a poem. And I thank you for bearing with me to hear it. The first page is not going to be too challenging. The last section, I'm not sure just what will happen when I try to read that. But I find that being a poet, even though it's nerve-wracking and always one's lack of confidence is very active during the hour or day before one gives a reading, but it's so helpful because I think poetry is a communal act. I think art is communal. Each thing that each of us does that is communal. It's not just like one person. You don't have a doctor with no patients. And you don't, you aren't, I want to turn that around so that I'm the patient and you're the doctors, because that's what's about to happen. So my next book after Odes, which will show you how stubborn I am, someone with the last name Olds who calls a book Odes, this is serious, who knows what. But the next one's going to be called Arias, and it will have a lot of things that are a little like songs. And this one, its tentative title is Aria by Association. Woken at 4 a.m. by a bass laying down a half note over and over between a G sharp and an A flat, I wander around my quiet, dark apartment, calm, errant. It's the huge fan on the roof above my ceiling. And there's a planet up, cold and white, a waning crescent above and to the west of the waning crescent moon, rising with its gray jazz musician cheek all pox and eighth notes and bumps up into another, a wilder key. And there's a star through the screen and the binocs, blue and glistening. It looks, because of my tremor, like the Pleiades. Down on the street, 2 quadruple stretch limos, one black, one white, with a lot of men in suits walking around them with flashlights shining in pools on the sidewalk and street, as if some Saturn has lost her wedding disk. Yesterday, for the first time in 20 years, I thought of putting on my ring, and both his rings, the original he lost mowing the lawn and found, and its replacement. He didn't want a souvenir of those 32 years. He gave the 2 of them back to me in the park, loose in a shopping bag, small orbits rattling in a solar system the color of butcher paper. They don't tell you what it will mean when you get the blurred human lens suctioned out of your eye and a plastic one put in, when they ask which focus you want, near or far. If you choose far, they don't mention that you'll never see a lover's face clearly in all its detail up close again. The occlusions are called cataracts. I think this is the section that will eventually come out. After the Middle English for floodgate of heaven, from the Latin for waterfall and portcullis, from the Greek for to dash down, to strike or smite. Lens is for lentil, the transparent biconvex body situated between this, in case we have to make one in a hurry later, the iris and the vitreous humor. It focuses light rays on the retina, entering the pupil. I thought I spent my life on love, but I spent more of the riches of my life on longing, the unearned riches and the riches earned by loving. Okay, that's it. Thank you. There will be more, but first I want to hear from you if there's anything you want to ask. There's always a Q&A in the middle, especially when we're so many of us poets together in this good setting with that snow falling outside.
Who would like to start the conversation?
You've already mentioned read a poem by a poet that you love. Whom else do you love?
Oh, there's so many poets I love. My main loves this day are my 12 Tuesday night students and my 12 Wednesday night students. I teach in the graduate creative writing program at NYU. And the classes are at night and always have been. So it isn't like Ivy League where someone who has to work 9 to 5 can't attend. And it's been a real leader in outreach programs. There's a hospital program for the severely physically challenged that's been running now for 32 years. Our students are the teachers. A women's prison, a children's oncology ward, and a new one for 6 years old for veterans of the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. So my heart is so full. I have this wonderful job. And so it's just very full of this year's gang right now. Yeah.
Our former state poet laureate, Betsy Shull, who played a big role in the festival earlier today, is fond of saying that one must write the bad poems in order to arrive with good poems. What would your ratio be in your, in your opinion?
I don't have a good record that way. And it has to be okay with me because luckily I write so much that isn't good that I can still have a low or high. My math is really not good, but I write a lot and I only type up a part of it. And I like to say that when I type them up and then revise, I try to take out half the adjectives and a third of the self-pity. So they'll still hold together. It's just my way. I mean, that's the thing. It's so lucky for so many reasons to get to be older and older and older. And one is that life is easier when you're not young. If all else being equal, there's nothing so hard as life when we're young. So life is easier. And also, I am just better at accepting. I write a lot I don't show anyone, but I'm not burning it up. You know, I'll leave it in my filing drawer. Yeah. Bill Matthews used to say, we need our bad poems. And I took courage from that. Yeah.
How do you know when a poem is done?
Mm-hmm. How do I know when a poem's done? I would say it lets go of me. I don't keep going back and opening the notebook. I write by hand in grocery store notebooks, wide rule. Partly so, if I wrote on beautiful paper, I would be so impressed I would never do anything. You know, I just wouldn't, it wouldn't be good for me. And so that's my way of, but then if I show it to a friend, I may find out that it wasn't really done, because they might point out a place it could be better. Yeah, but that's my usual way. Hi.
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 I think you and I are the same age, 75, about to be 75.
You look wonderful.
So,
Thank
so
you.
do you.
Well, thank you.
So for me, being nearly 75, I find myself contemplating death a lot, death for myself, for my spouse.
Mm.
And I wonder how that is for you.
Say that last, you wonder
How that is for you.
how that is for me. Yeah, that's such a great question. I'm very worried and desperately anxious and in anguish about the earth and this country and many things. So I'm by nature a worrier also, but I don't, you know, I don't think about my death unless in some kind of jokey way sometimes, or actually I'm writing a lot of stuff that figures that in, but it's not in the kind of way of if one is in a couple. I'm between boyfriends now, so when one is in a couple, then I mean that's a different world. Yeah, a blessed and a dangerous world. Yeah, but I'm most interested in the peculiar ideas that come into my head while I'm writing and the similes that come into my pen. So I'm not that serious a person these days, in a way. And may you both live forever. Yeah.
Sharon,
Yes.
this is a thank you, and it's a thank you that's 40 years late, over 40 years late. We were mothers together in the 96th Street playground, and I was a young mother, and I think I was mute, and you gave voice to everything I was feeling and that I couldn't express, and I was so in awe of you that I couldn't even approach you in the playground.
Oh,
So now I am thanking you.
What
I've
is
got
your name?
Deborah Shepherd.
Deborah Shepherd,
yes.
and who was
Jonathan and Dinah, but Gabe and Liddy were a little older, so you actually,
Oh, I see.
You actually sat on the other side of the playground. You were away from all the babies. But I do remember them. They were like little
Oh.
colts. They were long and
Oh.
yeah. So anyway, we'll
Oh.
talk later. Okay.
Thank you so much. Tell me your first name again.
Deborah.
Deborah. Thank you. Thank you. There's a gentleman in back who's had his hand up a long time. Is that canary yellow, that shirt? It's a great color.
Been home to change since Easter. I heard you in the 80s in UMass Amherst. How have you evolved? How is it more age appropriate? And are you the female Robert Frost? Are you a poet for America or the world like my ancestor Emily Dickinson? And how do you separate bad language? How do you sieve out the words and circumvent the built-in negativities of the English language with all its impediments? bad words based on white male privilege, almost Talmudic harshness of laws and black and white structures? And how can poets reinvent the language?
Absolutely, I'm completely with you. I think that if each of us who has a word that gets to us in one of those ways, we can play with it in a poem. We can give it its own poem. You could have a whole book of each poem being dedicated to or titled with a different word that for some reason gets your goat, you know, a bad, as it were, a bad word. I'm very enamored of what were called swear words when I was a kid. And that's partly because the dignified society in which I supposedly lived was not the kindest place. And then when I went out in the world more and saw people who weren't so polite, they were sometimes nicer than where I was from. So I'm really interested in, right, language of all kinds. We're in the right field to really care word by word. Yeah. Maybe one more?
As
Yes,
long
hi.
as you have been writing, have you always felt that you've been able to be bold and truthful, or is it something that evolved in time? I tend to be a self-censored writer, and censored writer, and it's something I struggle with. So I was interested in how you evolved with that.
Right, right. I used to hear some good advice that wasn't necessarily to be taken seriously, but like, be yourself. I took it seriously. It wasn't working to try to be a good child. And I think of the big deal for me, I didn't realize this till I was like 50, that I somehow worked it out that though God could see everything I did and my thoughts, that God could not read what I was writing, especially if I kind of hunched around it. It's true. It's like, get thee behind me, Satan, but this was get thee behind me, master of everything. And I did. So in other words, I was raised with a certain amount of good democratic individualism in theory. And in art, we can. So one thing one might try is to think of something that you would never write about, never, because you wouldn't want anyone to know it if you ever shared it with anyone. The great thing about writing a poem is that you know no one will ever see it. Unless you decide you want to show it to one person, but in a first draft, we're so safe. And if you were to try entirely alone to write, you know, a story of that thing you would never want to ever read here, I don't know, but for someone like me, it turns out to be fun. Free will. Fun. Thank you. Good luck to you. Yes, one more, please.
I just wanted to hear your thoughts, and thank you so much for what you've offered to us tonight and continuing.
Thank you.
Thank you. What are your thoughts about things that bubble up and want to be shared that might hurt someone, that will hurt someone? They'll, even if it's told as fiction, they'll know it's not, and it will hurt them. What are your thoughts?
Muriel Rukeyser used to ask at every place she gave a reading if anyone here knows of anyone who has been harmed by a work of fiction or poetry. Harmed, not pissed someone off, not hurt someone's feelings, but they're okay. Harmed. Please let me know, she said, because I'm looking for the truth about this, how often that happens. And so I've been doing it since. I haven't found anyone yet. Certainly hurt feelings. And also it's up to each of us what we do with everything we write. And there might, for some of us, be different values for our parents than another poet would have for theirs. That would make sense. And of course, there's different values vertically, parent as opposed to spouse or partner, and then children. That's the tricky one. I find, you can usually talk it out and find out, decide what you can do or not do, and if you want to make it the other person's decision. I mean, it's good, I think one can work these things out. I think it's different for everybody. And I'm definitely not the most loyal person in terms of what I write about. And I realize that my loyalty has been more towards other children in families like mine, families with alcoholism and violence, than it's been towards the blood family itself. And yeah, but no one knows except each one of us what we should do. I'm not sorry. I didn't lose, anyone by means of doing what I've done. But I could have misjudged the whole thing and thought it would be okay, and then in some horrible way it wasn't, but that the opposite happened from that. And I think that's because of the truth, that we all knew there were certain truths that weren't mentioned, but that were incredibly important. And so that's one of the most important things we can talk about. I was worried for a long time, and I'm not worried now. But I talk with my students about this all the time. Now, it's practically tomorrow. I'm going to read a few poems from odes. And okay. I have to have some water for this one. Amaryllis Ode. And thanks to whoever put these beautiful flowers here in the snow. Amaryllis Ode. When the blossoms were wilting, I cut the stalk and put it in a glass before my trip to have waiting for me the damp, withering blooms to see when I came back. I thought of the female side of my genealogy, the mothers who have liked to have waiting upstairs, a daughter stripped to be punished. And I realized I had been my mother's conduit to the satisfaction of being in her own time the beater. I think she did not know what she was doing. And it is nice, isn't it, to have something waiting, the knowledge of which will thrill you. How much drier will the blossoms be? How everted each pistil tip on its coral stalk, dusted with ochre seed. My mother and I were a twosome, as her mother and she had been, and her mother's mother. Mine used to perform a tune, not while she was beating on me. White coral bells upon a silver stalk. It was a pleasure for me to behead, head the amaryllis, to slit its throat. The last verse was, oh, don't you wish that you could hear them ring? That will happen only when the fairies sing, or in our case, when the dead mothers weep. My mother would weep to read this. Yes. Ode to My Whiteness, after Evie Shockley. Evie Shockley is this great young-ish poet, maybe 45 now, and her book, The New Black, came out by now maybe 10 years ago, and it has a poem in it, Ode to My Blackness. And so this is after Evie's poem. Ode to My Whiteness. You were invisible to me. You went without saying. You were my weapon secret from myself. Whatever I got, you helped get it for me. You were my ignorance. Because of you, I was not innocent. I did not see that. You were my blinding light. My dreams had a blank area in the center, taking up most of the screen they played on in my sleep, a blazing circle that blanked out the core of the scene. I thought it was my mother's violence, but it was you, too. You, the unseen fat which fed me in the wilderness. You, my Masonic handshake. You, my stealth. You, my drone. You, my collaborator. You, my magician's cloak of steam. You, my dissembler. You, mine. I, yours. Irisless eyeball. You, my blindness. Inspiration of my helpless act. You, my silence. Evie's blackness, a dancer. You, another. The two of you moving together. Thank you, Evie. Okay, I'll read two more. I want, so I'll just leave a few of those for another day. And where are you? Oh, yeah. Okay. Ode to the Hymen. I don't know when you came into being inside me, when I was inside my mother. Maybe when the involuntary muscles were setting like rose jello. I love to think of you then, so whole, so impervious, you and the clitoris as safe as the lives in which you were housed. They would have had to kill both my mother and me to get at either of you. I love her at this moment as the big fortress around me, the matron head around the sweet meat of my maidenhead. I don't know who invented you to keep a girl's inwards clean and well cupboarded. Dear wall, dear gate, dear stile, dear Dutch door, not a cat flap nor a swinging door, but a one-time piñata. How many places in the body were made to be destroyed once? You were very sturdy, weren't you? You took your job seriously. I'd never felt such pain. You were the hourglass lady the magician saws in two. I was proud of you, turning to a cup full of the bright arterial ingredient. And how lucky we were, you and I, that we got to choose when and with whom and where and why, plush pincushion, somehow related to statues that wept. It happened on the rug of a borrowed living room, but I felt as if we were in Diana's woods, he and I and you together. or as if we were where the magma from the core of the earth burst up through the floor of the sea. Thank you for your life and death. Thank you for your flower girl walk before me, throwing down your scarlet petals. It would be years before I married, years before I carried within me a tiny baby hymen, near the eggs with other teensy hymens within them. But you unscrolled the carpet, leading me into the animal life of a woman. You were a sort of blood mother to me. First, you held me close for 18 years, and then you let me go. And I'll close with this poem, which is for all of you, as well as when it was written in 2010. The poem is called Ode to My Living Friends. And in January 2010, that among them were Lucille Clifton, Ruth Stone, Adrienne Rich, Seamus Heaney, Amiri Baraka, Maxine Kuhlman, Galway Cannell, Mark Strand, Philip Levine, James Tate, C.K. Williams, C.D. Wright. Ode to My Living Friends. What a lengthy gap there has been between deaths. It seems as if none of those closest to us has gone for what seems months. For me, it's been so long that when I think of someone dying, I think of my mother and father, my farriers in out of nothing, out of the temporary rich something they were made of. I have carried them with me, not like a partial twin in a sling in front of and against me, but in my body, in my brain cells. But you, my friends, my chosen and chosen by ones, I see you as built-in aspects of the earth, like elements, like members of the periodic table. I know, we're mortal, the open door is there. But for weeks and weeks, I have forgotten that I'm going to lose every one of you until the ones who are left lose me. When I was a child, I could not have lost you. I did not know that I would find you. I'm blessed that it will happen to me. Before it does, let me say, you were exactly who I'd been looking for without daring to imagine. Breast that presses against other breasts, it was you. Root of washed sweet flag, timorous pond snipe, nest of guarded duplicate eggs, it was you. Hands I have taken, face I have kissed, mortal I have ever touched, it was you. Thank you.